Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Bean AMA. I guess we'll wait maybe 1 or 2 more minutes for any any late arrivers, but it looks like we already got a full house. Great. Publius, how are you doing?
Well, honestly, we just had a whole crazy past 15 minutes, an emergency at home, but glad we were able to clear it up with like 10 seconds to spare. So we're happy to be here.
Oh boy, sorry to hear that, but glad you resolved it. Hopefully, it wasn't being protocol related.
Not being correlated, interrelated. So, uh, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, well, to be clear, hopefully it wasn't also related to your health. The health, the personal health does matter more than the health of the protocol. Let's not get carried away. But glad you're here.
I was unharmed, but another member of the household was harmed, so I had to take care of that. So glad we're here, but that's neither here nor there.
Perfect. Let's maybe give it 1 more minute and then we can get started. Does that sound good?
Sounds good to us.
And I apologize in advance. I'm just in a public place. I'm outside. Hopefully, I'm near a couple of big whales with 100 ETH, but I'm just outside. So if there is any background noise or anything of that matter, I apologize in advance, and I will go on mute when I'm not talking.
Great. So far, you sound pretty good.
All right. Well, look, we got around 40 people in here, and these normally go for about an hour. And I do want to stick to time. I know folks obviously have other things going on, so why don't we get started? It's been obviously, a crazy time over the past couple of weeks. The last AMA we did was at, I believe, the end of October, and this is the third Ask Me Anything that we're doing. So, welcome everybody in the Bean community. If you're whether you're new, whether you've been here, and whether you just literally joined a minute ago, it's been an absolutely amazing time since the inception of the project. I joined the Bean community in the beginning of October after I had first, Bean Merchant had told me about this project, and I joined excitedly, and it's been an exciting ride ever since. Obviously, if you look at the protocol statistics and you're looking at the activity, we're just absolutely crazy, right? We're looking at sky high APYs on the Silo LP side, and of course on the debt side it's been a wild ride from, I remember when there was so much available soil and beans were trading below $1, well below $1. And now we're at a point where, it's almost like, we're the stable coin is very stable at a premium, right? I heard it was a stable coin. I want my money back. So very crazy stuff. I think today, the purpose of today is obviously to ask questions about what's happening, but generally speaking, this is a community event and we really do want the community to stay and be involved. I think we've seen a lot of examples over the past 4 weeks, if not 2 weeks, of community members really stepping up and helping drive different elements of the project forward, whether it's with Bean FTs or even looking at the finer points of the Bean algo and the Bean mechanism and putting forth different proposals or even just trying to understand what are the different ways that we can help grow the project. Obviously, if you look at liquidity over the past, very recently, over the past couple of weeks, liquidity has more than doubled, and we're still at a point where, one of the reference points that I like to look at is, on Uniswap, you can look at a lot of the stablecoin pools, and many of these pools are in, to the order of several hundred million, if not more than a billion. And right now, our liquidity pool is, I haven't looked at the statistics recently, forgive me, but maybe around 11, 12, $13 million. So plenty of room to grow, plenty of exciting things ahead. 2 or 3 ground rules before we get started. If you have questions, feel free to put them into the AMA questions channel, which I'll be checking periodically. But obviously, also, once we get going, you can raise your hand here if you're new to Discord. I'm looking at my phone right now. If you're on the desktop, you should see this icon too. But at the bottom, there's usually a hand raise symbol. You could do that, and on your icon, we'll see that your hand is raised. We can bring you up to the stage, and then just make sure to be unmuted. There's also a mute button. It's the microphone, whether you're on the phone or whether you're on the desktop. You can click that, and if there's a cross through it, you're muted. If there's no cross, you're unmuted. You can ask your question. In general, just as the community grows and from the perspective of just safety and security, no one from the Bean community, or especially, the Publius team, but no one from there's no Bean help desk. No one's going to be reaching out to you and DMing you and asking for your wallet info or things or the finer points of security. So if you are getting any kinds of messages like that, I'm in New York. I'm in New York right now. If you see something, say something, right? If there's bad actors or if there are people that are doing things like that, please make that clear, because no one from the Bean organization or the Bean community should be doing that. And then more importantly, um, in general, obviously, not that I would expect this kind of behavior, but because we're all adults, but obviously, this is a play nice environment. We're trying to learn more, not just about the protocol, but also brainstorm about how the community can get more involved and how we can move this project forward. So that's the spirit in which we're doing this. And, I'm super happy to get this started. So, with us, we have the development team, goes by the name Publius here on the stage. And let's get this going. So, Publius, why don't we just kick off with a quick update about, where your head's at, and maybe a little introduction about what's going on here in Bean.
Well, thank you, IPO and Jill, for hosting. And I apologize if you hear a little sniffles. I'm a little under the weather. But to lead off, a polite correction would be that we can no longer claim to be the development team. We're just a part of the development team at this point, because one of the big updates around Beanstalk over the past couple weeks is the incredible development team that, and also just operational team and community that has started to grow around Beanstalk. So Publius remains the founder, but we're very enthused by the increase in engagement, development, and focus from new high quality members of the community. And there have been a couple of BDPs that have passed recently, and have also been proposed recently to add really high quality people to the Beanstalk Farms development team. And we're really thrilled with the pace that things are starting to pick up. So when we look at from an economic perspective, there's a lot to talk about in terms of what's going well and what can be improved further. And then also on the development side, the community and the development team and the marketing and operations side of things, it's all getting us incredibly excited for what's to come. And the main point of our attitude about what's going on today is, given the massive increase in demand for beanstalk and for beans, it makes sense to dramatically increase the size of the team even further. And so as we think ahead to what the Q1 budget proposal for Beanstalk Farms will look like, whereas the Q4 budget was $200,000, Beanstalk was a fraction of the size that it is now at, when the proposal was made at the beginning of October. And so we're thinking on the order of something like 1,000,000 beans for the Q1 Beanstalk Farms development budget. And the hope is to dramatically grow out our operational and development capacities in an entirely decentralized fashion. And we're thrilled by the progress, but in order to keep pace with the massive growth of Beanstalk on the economic front, we want to make sure that we're able to surround Beanstalk with enough high quality development that operates in a truly decentralized fashion. So this is all very exciting, and we're happy to and excited to answer everyone's questions about the various economic intricacies that are obviously up for debate in some of the chats. Full disclosure, we haven't, especially over the past week or two, as things have increased in activity in the Discord, we've stopped reading every message in the Discord for the first time, which on the one hand is a little bit nerve-wracking for us because we're so interested in what everyone is saying. But on the other hand, we have so much development work to do. We simply can't keep pace with the with the volume of messages, which is obviously in general a very good sign for the growth of the community. So that's sort of the 2-second version or the 2-minute version of what's going on. But to paint a picture about where we think this is going a little bit, without being too over hyper, just looking at it from an economic perspective, which is given the current amount of pods, which is over 270 million pods, and the bean supply of over 44 million, you have to multiply 270 times 2, which is 540. So Beanstalk is being valued at least $585 million on the debt side, which is very exciting. And we feel like, especially given that the current bean price is so high, that that's an indication that Beanstalk is in a good position to start to pay off a lot of its debt and decrease the pod line and the pod rate specifically. And if you look at the pod rate has come down from over 670%, if I recall correctly, to now almost 600%. And things like that are general indications that the system has started to deleverage. And when we consider where we are at in the grand scheme of things, ESD, which was, as we've spoken about, was sort of where we got our inspiration from, and we thought we can do much better than this, was launched in late August of 2020 and never repegged after mid-December. And Beanstalk and ESD maxed out around a market cap of around 500 million. So Beanstalk has now been around for since early August, and it's now got to be the beginning of December. So it's around the longest living, especially given that the price is above one and just returned below one for a very short period of time over the past hour or two, but is now back above one. It's evident that Beanstalk is going to continue to grow. And even if you consider, and we assume we'll be asked a little bit about how the soil changes that are in a draft proposal for a potential BIP-6, how that will affect the pod line and debt going forward. When you consider that currently Beanstalk is being valued at almost $600 million and is continuing to pay off debt and deleverage, when it does pay off all or most of its debt, it'll be in a very good position to continue to grow further from there. And so our main focus is over the next couple of months as that happens, and there may be oscillations significantly below the peg and above the peg. In the meantime, we're focused on starting to really establish a diverse, strong, really high quality development and operational infrastructure around Beanstalk. And that starts with a strong Beanstalk Farms development team and operational team. But obviously, as we've talked about, the hope is that this is also sourcing talent for people that are ultimately going to start their own development teams and work on their own things on Beanstalk or around Beanstalk. So there's lots of ideas for integration and areas for growth we're happy to talk about, and there's a ton of different stuff going on. So, in the next hour or two, we'll hope to cover as much as possible.
Okay, absolutely. And great to hear that the building out of the development team is coming along. Of course, we had a little issue over the past few weeks where, the Publius team stepped in and had to fix, on the back end of things, the issue with the silo, either printing too many beans for some folks or printing too few beans. I guess, do you want to talk about that a little bit just to kind of give the community a summary of what was going on, what happened, and then what will happen moving forward if issues like that arise?
Sure. So, and a lot of this was discussed at much more length in the class that was held last Tuesday, so a week ago, which was on the just a few hours after the pause happened. But there are a couple things that we really want to highlight. One is that we were really reluctant to pause Beanstalk, and there were multiple other instances where we've been made aware of small bugs, uh, that are very similar in terms of they were also misallocations of beans to different silo members. And when we did our initial research, it was evident that it was on a much smaller order of magnitude than uh, the misallocation that we were made aware of last Tuesday. And especially given that Beanstalk was growing so quickly, as there seemed to be a massive inflow of capital on Tuesday, that that made it such that the misallocation appeared that it was going to get much, much worse. And given that Beanstalk is at such an early stage, and all of our supporters are sort of uh, expecting one thing, we felt like it was a very low cost in terms of risk to the protocol, but high benefit decision to pause Beanstalk for a short period of time. And the other thing we want to highlight is the decentralization aspect of it. One thing we've been very open about, or tried to be as open as possible about, is that the Publius wallet address, the deployer of the Beanstalk contract, still has unilateral ability to change the Beanstalk contract into pause Beanstalk. And over time, we really hope to have that privilege revoked. And we hope to even be able to propose a BIP to remove that privilege. And that's something that is largely a function of how robust the security of Beanstalk is and how strong it appears. And there's a couple things to keep in mind here. And obviously, as the value of Beanstalk grows, the interest in attacking it also grows. And so over time, it will demonstrate some aspect of security. But, one of the things that we were very excited about is that there are two audit BIPs that both appear to already have a majority, and with a couple days left, could still even potentially reach a supermajority. And we've already received documents from those audit firms, and as soon as those fundraisers get started and funded, we can start having Beanstalk audited, and that's going to be a major step towards starting the conversation of what else needs to happen for ownership privileges to be revoked. And the only other thing we want to caution is over the next couple months, there are going to be a ton of integrations added to Beanstalk, hopefully, in terms of other decentralized exchanges, other lending protocols, other chains, and ultimately there is something to be said for having the ability to pause very quickly. And especially given our experience over the past couple, over the last week or so, that situation, there is something to be considered about potentially making the governance able to act even quicker than just 24 hours, and maybe make it an hour or two. But that's something that we're also open to hear from the community based on everyone else's experience. And these are all things that are open for consideration at the moment. And, this is meant to be a collaborative process.
Okay, thank you. Also, as a reminder, if you do have questions, feel free to just raise your hand in the Discord. On that point about integrations, that's obviously something that comes up quite a bit in the chat, and even for this AMA, people have had some questions. Why don't we actually dive into that a little bit, given that it's been a common topic with regards to integrations? What exactly is the current state of this? Are there current conversations? And with regards to how do you feel which integrations would be meaningful, and are we thinking also of things like cross-chain integrations? For instance, getting into layer two and creating some version of Bean on layer two.
So the main point when it comes to integrating Beanstalk, and you can really think about it in two separate segments. One is integration with various protocols on a given chain, and then there's separately integrations with other chains. When it comes to integration with, and we can just think about currently Beans on Ethereum, the Bean ecosystem is still not fully formed, meaning stock and seeds and silo beans are not liquid and tradable. There's still a massive inefficiency in the bean price, and it's not yet at $1. And there's a couple efficiencies we think we can change in the model to make it further uh, maintain a much tighter peg to one. And over the next month or two, as Beanstalk continues to demonstrate an ability to oscillate over one, we think it's very reasonable to expect that other protocols will start to consider holding beans or holding deposited beans and making the Beanstalk ecosystem develop internally so that it is itself robust will make it much better to integrate with other protocols. So one just example that makes it pretty clear why it's beneficial to have Beanstalk continue to grow itself and let other protocols add or integrate Beanstalk over the next couple months gradually. And there is something to be said for we do want to really start having organized integrations, management, and operations and development front, which is all going to hopefully be part of the Q1 budget. But when we think about the potential danger of an integration where Beanstalk isn't quite ready to support itself against larger attackers, we just have to be careful for what the integrations look like. So, for example, we've talked about integrating with a curve pool and potentially in order to compensate for the fact that if you have a stable swap uh, style pool with Bean and 3 curve, the price of Bean is going to most likely get much closer to $1, which will mean that the beans or soil getting minted is much less than it currently is. And therefore, there's some reason to try to integrate the liquidity in the curve pool as well into the minting algorithm. But that opens Beanstalk up to a potential attack where somebody who has a billion 3 curve could just add the 3 curve to the curve pool, because unlike Uniswap, where you have to add equal parts beans and ETH, for curve, you don't have to add equal parts bean and 3 curve. Therefore, you can basically, if you assume that there's not a lot of liquid supply, you can exploit Beanstalk and cause an overmint for a period of time just by adding an arbitrarily large amount of 3 curve to the Bean 3 curve pool. So there's a couple things that we've been thinking about as potential alternatives to A, bolster Beanstalk stability, and B, sort of make Beanstalk ready to integrate with other protocols. But with regards to curve specifically, we think Beanstalk is probably ready for a Bean 3 curve pool, but it doesn't even need to necessarily be incentivized, and that will probably grow in due time. But the Uniswap Bean ETH pool is going to continue to grow because of the incentivized aspect of it, and it will continue to be a strong oracle for the price of a bean. But sort of a unique idea we've been working on internally on Beanstalk Farms, and one of the proposals that's out right now to hire Beasley, he's already started to kind of work on this and think about this, which is that we're going to allow, hopefully, or we're going to make a proposal that will allow people who have deposited beans or deposited LP tokens to convert back and forth when the price is above or below the peg, but only in that instance. So what that means is right now the price is too high above the peg. There's a ton, like 30 million or more deposited beans. Anyone who has deposited beans can convert those deposited beans to deposited LP tokens, get more seeds without even needing to contribute additional ETH. That will return the price to the peg and increase liquidity, and that will increase stability. and then you'll still have an increase in the bean price as reflected in the TWAP if the price throughout the season remains above $1. But this should basically cause a massive increase in liquidity in the bean ETH pool and also increase stability drastically at $1. So these are the types of ideas that we think can really take Beanstalk to the next level and allow it to integrate really nicely with other protocols. And in addition to just trying to set up like an internal organization to coordinate a lot of that development, we've also been told that Beanstalk may start to be eligible for grants, potentially reasonably large grants, to start to integrate with other protocols that want us to integrate with them. And that's very exciting. And community members like George B have been really excellent at coordinating a lot of that, and we're very grateful for their efforts there. And there are some things that can be done additionally internally, like potentially providing an Oracle suite, depending on the unique applications like lending protocols and the like. But in general, Beanstalk and Bean is more or less ready for integrations, but the integrations will likely become more and more attractive for other protocols as Bean starts to oscillate tighter to $1, which again, we think is going to start to happen over the next couple of weeks as we continue to roll out BIPs that will improve the efficiency of the system and allow it to deleverage while maintaining the price at a tighter and tighter peg.
Got it. Thank you for that. Looking at the stage, I think it's probably a good time to go for some questions. Rubisco, I see you with your hand raised. I'm going to try and bring you up on the stage here. Maybe Publius, I think you might have to do this. There we go.
Hey,
Rubisco,
guys.
welcome to the stage. What's your question?
Hi. IPO, thanks for hosting, and Publius, great job with everything. Thanks for answering questions, and community, hello. Thanks for communitying so well. My question's about the auditing BIPs. I just wanted to kind of understand a little bit better the thinking behind doing two at the same time, because, you know, in the software world, you hire QA firms to QA, you know, your software and look at the code and help you, you know, figure it out and debug it. But there could be a certain amount of redundant, like if both of them are trying to do it at the same time, they might just find the same issues. And so there could be some inefficiency there if you're paying a lot of money for two different companies to be doing work that, you know, that might just be kind of unnecessarily redundant. So that was what I was curious about.
So ultimately, we're not particularly convinced that any one audit is like a catch-all for security. And so I don't necessarily think that the sort of implied or the implication of your question, which is one audit will be good enough, or one audit is sort of enough to get us started, is correct. Instead, ultimately, we want to have a bunch, like a half a dozen or more, high quality auditors review every piece of code that gets added to the Beanstalk Diamond before it gets deployed. But getting those relationships started early is important. And A, there isn't necessarily a priority of getting one before another. And B, we felt like getting them both started as soon as possible would allow us to spend sort of a concentrated period of time on our end internally, potentially implementing any fixes to issues that they discover all at once. Whereas it's difficult for us to block out, you know, extensive periods of time to do things like that in very short order, multiple times in a short period of time. So we didn't necessarily want to stagger them. So it was a little bit of convenience. And Publius, you may have more you want to add.
Yeah, so just a few more things to add on to your response, Publius. The first of which is we spent a serious amount of time trying to find a quality auditor that we felt was good enough to, one, both audit the code of Beanstalk, and two, be sufficiently experienced with the EIP 2535 Diamond standard that Beanstalk implements. And we found that with Trail of Bits, they were incredibly competent in doing a deep dive into the code, and Omnisca had previous experience auditing the Diamond implementation. In addition, the services they kind of provide are a little different. Omnisca is going to do a lot more, providing testing suites, as well as gas optimizations. And then in addition, just the fact that we were able to find two great auditors that we thought were of quality at the same time means it could be a potential missed opportunity if we weren't going to do both right away.
Okay. Rubisco, any follow-ups? Is that?
Oh yeah, I did. Sorry, kids were making noise outside. That helps, I think, to some extent, explain the question. If they're doing things that are a little bit different, but I could also see that there would be value in a more iterative approach where you get the results of one audit and then implement the results, and then get another one on the iteration that you just did. In that way, you might be, like I was saying before, saving some redundant work where they're discovering the same issues and applying the funds and the energy of the auditors to two different iterations, where they're not just going to deliver something that might be, they found a bunch of the same problems. So I know it's probably not as simple as that, but it's not necessarily clear from where I sit in the community, like what the details are of what they'll be doing that's different and how the funds will be kind of efficiently spent in that way.
So we agree that at some point it would be overkill to have the original unaudited code audited all at once by 5 or 10 auditors. So we think that 2 is a relatively small amount to start with. But when you talk about, being concerned about redundancy, if anything, what we want is redundancy in this instance. So what we're paying for is redundancy, and specifically for high quality auditors to spend time doing things that are otherwise redundant. Because you could say, look, Beanstalk is operating in the wild and is fine, but ultimately none of that is redundant if at any point there are any vulnerabilities discovered. So when we talk about where we want Beanstalk to be 3 months down the road, we want 6 auditors auditing Beanstalk, and we want them all looking at every BIP before it's proposed formally on chain, and we want them all to comment on it sort of all at once, because when we're trying to move product as a protocol and as a development team at Beanstalk Farms, the hope is that we'll be able to circulate the BIP to a couple different audit firms that are all familiar with the Beanstalk contract intimately and can give it a quick review and hopefully a quick seal of approval, and then be ready for formal introduction on chain. And ultimately, the hope is that we can have Beanstalk pay for auditors' time in advance and have potentially other community-led proposals or other proposals not by Beanstalk Farms even audited before they are proposed. And so this is just the beginning of forming high-quality auditor relationships, and starting with 2 we felt like was a pretty conservative start, especially given the rate that Beanstalk is growing at this point in time.
That sounds great to me. Thanks for a good, high quality answer. Appreciate it. I'll jump off the stage now.
Awesome. Just looking down. Remember, if you have any questions or you want to ask anything, feel free to submit something in the AMA questions channel if you don't want to speak or you're not in a situation where you can, or raise your hand down there. And thank you so much for your question, Rubisco. Those kids are making noise. Going to be making a lot more noise when these pods clear, I'll tell you that. But security seems to be a theme in this conversation. Obviously, we've been taking some measures with this BIP to improve it, and then we also talked a little bit more about potentially sustaining attacks. Can you talk a little bit about attacks in general and what risks we are subjected to, or maybe even if there have been attacks on the platform that we may not have been aware of? Obviously, if you look at the price chart, and we've talked about this before in previous AMAs, there has been a situation, or there was a situation earlier on in the history where I guess you can characterize it as an attack. We called it a pump and dump. But have there been other types of attacks reflected in the market statistics?
So the most notable one would be simple MEV or minor extractable value attacks on larger trades in the Bean pool, but that seems to have decreased to some extent as the volume and the liquidity have increased, which is good. And then you talk about what are the exploits actually been attempted. The most notable, you're correct, is the original pump and dump that happened in the beginning of September, where people thought they could deposit assets into the silo and quickly leave and dump at a premium before a season of plenty, and they lost a lot of money. So obviously we've talked about that whole pump and dump at length and don't need to necessarily talk about it any further unless people have specific questions, but excuse me. But there are two attack vectors or classifications that you could generally group things into. One is on the technical side, and the other is on the economic side. And from an economic perspective, that attack in September was more of an economic attack. And as Beanstalk continues to grow, it will become more and more resilient to economic attacks. And on the technical side, that is the benefit of having auditors, because they will bring deep expertise about all sorts of extensive histories of different exploits and attacks on smart contracts and open source code in general. And that will hopefully bolster Beanstalk against technical exploits. So where some protocols have really gotten into trouble is something like with Compound, where they had functions that didn't do necessarily what they wanted them to do, and that caused an increase in the supply that was not appropriate. And Beanstalk does have built into every function effectively a check on the supply before and after you make your transaction, and that makes it resistant to exploits like that, meaning that no one can conduct a transaction where they actually change the bean supply unilaterally. So Beanstalk is designed to be very resistant to a lot of this stuff, but we still feel like having Beanstalk audited by, again, like Trail of Bits is a world-class auditing firm. So we're very excited to have them really get their hands on our code. And we would just add lastly that the agreements that we signed with Trail of Bits, for example, actually includes extra time in addition to what they think the original audit will cost, so that as Rubisco was sort of indicating, when there's a need to go back and reanalyze potentially an edited version or a revised, improved version of the code base, we've already allocated enough beans and contracted them to be able to do that. So we're very hopeful that these are going to be long-term relationships that will make Beanstalk really resilient to both technical exploits, mainly on the audit front, but also on the economic front, because as we said, like the main place where there's potentially wiggle room is when you have something on the borderline between technical and economic.
Great. Very thorough. Looking down at the stage, I think we have a question from Farmer Joe's Bean Emporium with two scrolls. I like that. Can we bring him up on the stage? If there's someone that can do that, I got to get this new feature here. Sorry. There we go. Farmer Joe, welcome to the stage. What's your question?
Hello. I'll just start by saying I love this project. I'm very excited about the potential of the pod marketplace as well. So I really hope that gets through. But my question was just around. I think I was inspired by the last question around security, and particularly the final comment there around key risks being the blend between economic and technical. I noticed that in this last, I suppose you could call it bull run of Bean. There was an incredibly large ETH sow that occurred, and I suppose just to ask a question there, is that something that the team has considered as creating a potential risk for people that are behind that sower in the pod line? Does that create any risks at all? And has this been thought about in the system design? And that's just something that I'm thinking about, given that I have some pods behind that sower. I'm just keen to hear some thoughts around that, and if that risk is managed by the current protocol design.
Well, ultimately, Beanstalk has harvested over 10 million pods over the past week, and that large sower has on the order of 10 or 15 million pods total over a couple different sows that have gaps in between. And so, candidly, given the trading volume and the liquidity in the ETH pool already, we would expect the protocol to easily be able to handle that. And over the past couple days, it has been handling that type of volume. So it does expose Beanstalk to some extent to an exploit, if you want to call it that, where someone could harvest in bulk and dump all at once. But we feel like, especially given that harvest and dump would then cause a decrease in the pod line and basically give everyone a premium to buy below $1 potentially, we think that there's sufficient demand, or what we mean to say is that the system has approached sort of a sufficient network size where there seems to be enough demand below $1, and we think there would definitely be enough demand well below $1 if somebody wanted to dump beans in mass in an inefficient fashion. We wouldn't be concerned about Beanstalk not returning to the peg relatively quickly.
No, thank you for answering that. That makes perfect sense. And actually, as I heard you say that, it would be incredibly inefficient to dump. And presuming that the person is, like reasonably sophisticated, they would be disincentivized to dump all of it at once, because they obviously would want to maximize, the price at which they're able to, trade their beans for other assets. So that would be a disincentive for them to dump as well. Thanks for answering my question. That was all I had.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah, I also hope the person who sowed 90 Ethereum, I hope anybody with 90 Ethereum, is a rational actor and is acting rationally. And obviously, if you look at the statistics currently in terms of the silo and the returns, the potential 12-month returns there, I do think it looks like a natural transition for those who are harvesting pods. But at the end of the day, this is not financial advice. I guess keeping with that theme, Publius, of looking at
let the record show that one wallet sowed 228 ETH, I believe.
Yeah. The Etherscan is wild. It really opens your eyes to how much cryptocurrency folks really have. What's going on here? Abe Bob. Is this expected?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I just accepted. Is
this an attack? No.
You didn't give me an on-ramp there, but is that a yes? I can ask a question.
Sorry, Abe.
Yeah.
Sorry, Abe. I just brought you on there.
Definitely, Abe. Come ask away if you want.
Okay. No, thank you.
Thing.
I appreciate your time. I'm going to go the open-ended one, and you've talked a lot about how you look at the world 3 months out from now? And I guess mine would be what, it almost goes into like a cliche startup question, but what does keep you up at night on those risks? Is it more of the economic ones or the technical ones? And maybe paint a picture of what's on your mind, big picture, over the next 3 to 6 months of the project.
Well, the answer is not one or the other. It's both, in the sense that everything that we add to Beanstalk, whether that's another chain, a layer 2, an integrated DEX, the way we described we were thinking about integrating curve liquidity, all of those things are both economic and technical questions. So it's not one or the other. Instead, sort of the thing that makes Beanstalk work is the marriage of economic and technical, which a lot of this stuff is only made possible by smart contracts and decentralized settlement. For example, the first in, first out Podline, it's a lot harder to give a loan to a closed private entity where they'll say, oh yeah, you get in the back of the line and we'll tell you when you're up. Like, how do we know that you're not going to let your friends cut us? So the fact that this is all happening on a decentralized network allows all sorts of unique new economic structures to exist. So we're very excited to be able to add new things to Beanstalk and have Beanstalk integrated with lots of protocols, but it's not one or the other. It's a combination.
That makes sense. No, appreciate that. Thank you.
Cool. Anything else? Yeah, to that point, Publius, about folks, irrational acting, things of that nature, anything that could potentially cause economic issues from an actor. When you look at the liquidity pool, clearly, I do think a lot of this velocity on the protocol side of things over the last few weeks has really been driven by the dramatic increase in liquidity that we've seen over the last few weeks. Is there any, and we've asked for this analysis and some folks have put together some things, but from your perspective, Publius, in the liquidity pool, in the LP, what is the level of decentralization there? When we're talking about the Podline, obviously there are some folks that have big chunks of the Podline, but when we look at the LP, are there folks independently who may have 10% or 20% ownership in terms of the LP, where if they were to just get up and leave one day, it could potentially cause a situation?
So one of the beauties of the Stalk system and the overall structure of the mechanism is that it's designed to dilute everyone over time. So even if everyone makes money, their ownership of Beanstalk should decrease as the system expands. So in this case, from the chain data, it seems like a ton of the new liquidity that's been added has been sowers that perhaps only sowed and hadn't deposited any or much in the silo prior to this, are now harvesting and using the tax efficiency from BIP-2 and using that to effectively add LP, and that is making the ownership in the silo and ownership of stock and ownership of liquidity more diversified and more diluted over time. So that has only started to happen, and we expect things to get even more diluted over time. But already that has started to happen. So when you ask about like where is this liquidity coming from, the vast majority of it is coming from harvestable pods that are harvesting their pods above $1 and selling half into LP, selling half into Ethereum, and then adding that into the liquidity pool and doing that in a tax efficient fashion. So that's pretty encouraging when we think about getting Beanstalk to a place where there's no one actor that can have such a large outsized effect on the protocol. That process is well underway, but will obviously get better and better and better as the protocol continues to grow.
Got it. Thank you. That's really good to hear. Coming up on the hour here, it's 8:20. We kick things off at around 7:30, 7:32. I think moving forward for the next couple of minutes, obviously in the absence of any questions, do you want to talk a little bit about? You mentioned a draft BIP-6. I took a quick look at it regarding adjustments to the soil and potentially delevering or allowing the protocol to delever in a healthy way. Do you want to talk a little bit about BIP-6 and why it's important that the protocol is not over-levered?
Definitely. So, and yeah, we're not in a rush to go anywhere. And as there continue to be questions, we're happy to answer any and all of them. So, specifically, there's the question of, is the pod rate coming down, which that is the general overall deleveraging of the system. The pod rate being the debt level of the system is the best indicator of how levered up the system is at any given moment. But ultimately, the expectation is that the pod rate will continue to come down if Beanstalk continues to grow so aggressively. But the fact that the pod rate isn't coming down that fast, even though there's excess demand for soil every single season, that's an indication to us that the soil isn't being set as efficiently as possible. And so we've been thinking for a while about the best way to do this. And to some extent, this was one of the things that we highlighted in the future work of things that could potentially be improved, because figuring out how much soil to issue during the deleveraging process, keeping in mind that the main reason to issue soil is to have a way to price debt and to figure out whether the weather should be going up or down. It's very difficult to figure out how much soil is necessary on the one hand to make sure that you're getting an accurate reading of demand for soil, meaning if you issue 0, 100 soil, like that's the transaction fees are going to make it difficult to get a real gauge on demand for soil. But on the other hand, it's not necessarily so. You don't want to have it so that the soil is so much or so little that the pod rate either doesn't come down much at all or goes down to 0 very quickly. So the solution that we came up with was, instead of having the minimum soil be a function of the minimum soil rate, which currently is hard coded as 0.1% of the total bean supply, we figured that it should actually, the soil this season should factor in the weather, which is effectively the ratio between the soil issued and the pods that will be issued as debt on the other side, assuming all of the beans are sown in all the available soil. But the other thing it should factor in is the pods that were harvested at the start of the season. Therefore, if the bean supply is increasing net, and you're still having a sufficiently large amount of soil so that you can accurately measure demand for soil, well, then you can basically guarantee that even if there's excess demand for soil every season while the weather is coming down, the most amount of pods that could get issued is such that the pod line doesn't decrease. But again, because the bean supply is increasing, the pod rate will start to decrease. So the pod line at most will sort of get locked in here as large as at its current length, as long as there's excess demand for soil, and that will allow the system to deleverage much more effectively.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, these soil wars have definitely been getting pretty heated. It's like people are sniping soil left and right. It's it's like American Sniper out here. I guess maybe to even be more general about things, why is it important that the platform does not operate with excess leverage? What are the risks of operating with more leverage than the platform needs?
Well, leverage is, at least in theory, what would cause lenders to require a higher weather. So the ability to pay off debt and to decrease the overall debt level will have a positive feedback loop in the will create a positive feedback loop in the sense that it will lower the weather, which lowers the cost of borrowing for Beanstalk. And so Beanstalk will have more leg room to issue debt during any period where the price is less than 1, and it should be able to attract significant lenders at a significantly lower weather if the pod rate can decrease significantly. So the debt level increasing will help Beanstalk enter a more sustainable position. And the important thing to note is that whatever ideal equilibrium is, whatever that weather is where the price is going to oscillate regularly above 1 and the debt level will be around 15%, around the optimal debt level, it's unclear what that weather is. But as Beanstalk continues to oscillate, and sort of circle around, if you think about it in a two-dimensional space, circle around ideal equilibrium, we expect this type of volatility, but over time, we do think things will start to settle down. So this is all natural, and the beauty of the system deleveraging is that it should naturally lower the weather or the necessary weather to attract lenders. And so that is what creates the positive feedback loop that at some point should end the debt cycle entirely and get us back down to below optimal debt level.
Got it. Super helpful. So we're coming up on the hour. I'm just scanning here. Oh, Dumpling, what's going on? Do you have a question?
No, I'm just hopping up. You mentioned I could take things into overtime.
Yeah, if we go into overtime, I do have a thing that just came up. I may have to run a little bit after the hour, but I'm obviously here and talking. I guess looking forward, I'm just scanning for questions. Looking forward, Publius,
we're happy to stay for at least another hour. So
Great.
We understand if you have to hop IPO and chill, and we appreciate your moderating the first half. But there seem to be a decent amount of questions, and we're thrilled that people are so interested and have so many questions. So we're happy to continue answering them as they pop up. So Dumpling, not sure if you had a question, but feel free to ask away, or otherwise we can bring someone else up here.
Yeah, no, I think Dumpling can definitely help moderate. If, after I leave, my last, or one of the questions on my mind, which is something that we talk about at usually every AMA, is looking at the community and trying to. Obviously, we've seen many snapshots come up, and the community has already been very much involved in stepping up and doing things. But when you think about how the community can move forward in this new period of growth, aside from obviously voting on BIPs and commenting on snapshots, what are the community needs at this point forward, relative to previous points in the protocol?
So in the past, we've sort of expressed, if you want to work on Beanstalk in some capacity, let us know. And at this point, we would expand that to say, if you know anyone that you would like to have work on Beanstalk, you should try to connect us with them, because at the pace Beanstalk is growing, we're going to ultimately have to rely on our community to recruit high-quality developers, high-quality operations people, high-quality integrations and partners in terms of other protocols that want to specifically work with work to integrate Beanstalk as an early integration. A lot of that is going to have to be community led. So we're definitely trying to do our part to get the Beanstalk Farms development team up and running and getting that infrastructure live. But right now we've got half a dozen devs, and we're trying to get Beanstalk Farms up to like two dozen devs or so, in the next month or so, as we get this budget for Q1 up. So our hope is to radically expand Beanstalk Farms, and as we also mentioned, hopefully at some point get enough people working on Beanstalk that there can be at least a second independent development team working on Beanstalk. And this is all part of what the road to decentralization looks like. So there's a lot to be done on this front, but we feel like it's mainly going to have to come from the community. And so people that want to get involved or know people that they want to get involved, now is a great time. And one thing that we think we're going to add, hopefully, to, or we're going to make part of the proposal for the Beanstalk Farms budget, is allow the people that are employed by or under contract, we shouldn't say employed, but under contract from the Q1 budget, they will be able to sow their beans independent of whether there is available soil, similar to how the fundraising mechanism for the audits work. So we think that's a great way to get really high quality, long-term attachment from developers and get them integrated into Beanstalk for the long run. And our hope is that through the community, we'll be able to source really high quality developers and people on the front end to manage operations and communications with the community and things like that as well.
Awesome, thank you. And the last thing I'll ask before I hand it over to my my good buddy Dumpling here is what, and in a way you're alluding to this by demonstrating, you're hiring 24 developers and clearly building a lot of infrastructure. It obviously demonstrates a long-term commitment to this project and a commitment such that it can go on to exist without the Publius function necessarily handling every single thing that comes up. When you look across the world of cryptocurrency, especially DeFi projects, obviously there are plenty of things like reserve currency DAOs that pop up, like Ohm that we've talked about, and many others. More often than we'd like, we do see projects that are commonly referred to as rugs, or projects that on the surface look very, very promising, but it turns out that the folks running the projects had very bad or malicious incentives. A bit of a controversial question, but I think it's worth asking, especially for some of the newer folks who are trying to learn more about the team behind this and where the project is going. Can you talk a little bit more about why your long-term incentive or long-term commitment to the project, and why that risk, may or may not be a big risk here?
That's a great question. And it's really important that people understand that even though at this point in time, the community is still looking to us for a lot of guidance on where the protocol should go, we are deeply committed to having Beanstalk get to a place where it is no longer reliant on Publius. And we think that that is fundamental to the long-term success of Beanstalk. But at the same time, that's not necessarily related to the risk of a rug. And with regards to the risk of a rug, we would say, from the way we've conducted ourselves from the beginning, we've tried to put Beanstalk in a position where the ownership of Beanstalk is as diversified, decentralized as possible. And accordingly, I truly believe that if today Publius sold 100% of our interest, it would have a negligible effect on Beanstalk. And that's a hypothetical because we remain deeply connected and deeply invested mentally and emotionally in the long-term success of the protocol. And furthermore, just in terms of incentives being aligned, we feel like there's no benefit in trying to cash out at all, whether we're leading the way in some capacity or not, because if Beanstalk succeeds, that's going to be amazing, and that will do well for everyone who's been a long-term investor in Beanstalk. And we're not, it's not it's not like we have such a large share that we could affect the protocol or crush the protocol. We're really committed to the long-term success of the protocol, separate from C. Over the next couple months or a year plus, we're going to be actively and deeply involved in the development of Beanstalk and getting it to a place where it's much, much larger and much more self-sustainable. So, all you can do is take us at our word, but we continue to do everything in our power to put Beanstalk in the absolute best position to succeed going forward and in general, and we would never take any action that we believe would be to the detriment of the protocol. And that's our promise to you.
Got it. I do think there are some resources as well. Obviously the Treasury Etherscan is public, and there are some other things. Maybe there could be some more economic analysis on why that would not be a meaningful route to go. But really appreciate the answer. Dumpling, I do want to hand it over to you. I highly apologize. I do have to run. However, this has been obviously very fun. I love hosting these and moderating these. I do think they're very helpful for those listening who may have joined a little bit later. This is being recorded, so you will be able to listen to this in its entirety, which I'll definitely be doing afterwards. And then, of course, if you do have Stalk, there are many proposals, whether on the snapshot side or the BIP side. So hopefully this AMA was a little helpful in maybe helping you figure out how you're going to vote. And I do recommend folks go and vote on some of these proposals. But thank you very, very much, and look forward to listening to the rest of this later.
Okay, well, thanks IPO and Chill and Publius and everyone. This is really exciting to see these grow from 10 people, 12 people, all of a sudden 50 people. This is really cool. And I see a lot of familiar faces out there, but I also see a lot of new people, so that's really cool to see. So yeah, taking this into the second hour here, you have the B team moderator, but I'll try to get people up here as they raise their hands, and I have one or two other questions and things that I might chime in with as well. So Rubisco, we have you up again. Let me bring you up. Okay, Rubisco, round two. We can't hear you, Rubisco. You might have to unmute. Okay, well, until we have you, one thing I wanted to bring up is we do have the funding just came through for the merch project. So anyone who's been a member of 3 meetings is now eligible for their green NFT merch, which is pretty cool. So you can either DM me or you can send me an email at lawdumpling@protonmail.com, and then we can correspond there with your merch and what you would like. And I'm running that project. So Rubisco, how's it going? Shoot, we might have to bring up another speaker here.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, can hear you now.
Great, thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Not sure what happened there. Yeah, thanks for taking another question. I wanted to go back to BIP-6 for a minute, and I have one short clarification question about something Publius said in the chat earlier, and then one slightly longer question about it. The clarification is, you said that I think you said that the pod clearance time would be lower, but then there was some confusion about whether you meant that it would slow down or speed up. That's the first quick question.
Meaning that the expectation would be that given a similar amount of expansion in the supply of beans, we would expect the seasons to pod clearance to decrease. Like apples to apples, this will cause there to be less soil, and therefore it will cause there to be less pods, and therefore it will cause the seasons to pod clearance to be lower.
Okay, got it. Thanks, that helps. Then the slightly more philosophical question maybe is, when you were discussing kind of the rationale behind it and wanting to basically use it as a mechanism, make it more efficient and stable in the long term, it all made total sense to me. But it also seems like there's a factor right now of just the viral nature of protocols in cryptocurrency, where when people hear about it's the FOMO thing, when people hear about exciting opportunities and big returns and stuff heats up, and the word of mouth spreads, then that is a valuable sort of quantity to the protocol and the growth of it as well. And so it seems there is some of that going on right now with growth and excitement around it. So I'm just curious how you factor that into a decision that might sort of slow things down or sort of decrease some of the heat in the system, if you even accept that that is what's going on right now,
Definitely.
in favor of a kind of a more sustainable, rational, long-term picture.
So we would argue that more regularly the Beanstalk cools off, the better. And so, candidly, the soil isn't going to do that much to have Beanstalk cool off. In the short term, it's going to help Beanstalk deleverage over the next couple weeks in a more elegant fashion. But we are thinking about potentially efficiency improvements to have Beanstalk spend hopefully a lot more time closer to a dollar or on both sides of the dollar potentially, and at least for a short period of time to have the system cool off. And so right now you ask yourself, well, why is the price so high? The price is so high because there aren't enough sellers who are willing to sell their beans at $1, at $1.05, and accordingly, Beanstalk continues to increase the supply, and the price is regularly coming below $1, maybe once a day or so. But it's not able to when it's faced with such excess demand, the current model isn't able to regularly bring the price down without radically increasing the supply, which is not helpful in terms of long-term sustainability. So one idea we've been thinking about is, well, where could we potentially introduce supply on Uniswap in a way that isn't inflationary to the bean supply? And so currently the vast majority of beans are in the bean silo. They're deposited beans. And so we're thinking that if we add the ability to convert deposited beans to deposited LP without adding additional Ethereum, that will allow a large percentage potentially of the 30 million plus deposited beans to get converted into LP. And the rule that will be enforced by the contract is you can only convert beans into ETH without adding additional ETH. You can only convert beans into LP without adding additional ETH if the price is greater than 1. And another rule we're thinking about specifically is you can only do it if the price is greater than 1 and the TWAP of the last season was also greater than 1. So these are still things that we're thinking about at the micro level on how to make the rule the best. But in general, allowing silo beans to be sold immediately when the price is above 1 should increase liquidity and should increase the ability for Beanstalk to return to the peg, at least until all of the currently deposited beans are converted into LP, which, given the current amount of beans in the liquidity pool and the beans in the silo, that should be sufficient to cause a significant cool down in the system, which we think would be very healthy at this point in time. Now, obviously, getting that BIP out is still at least a couple days away, given how we're talking about it, and then it would be probably a week to pass. So this isn't happening necessarily anytime soon, but with the soil BIP we do intend to propose in the next 24 hours or so, hopefully that will cause an increase in the rate at which the Podline is coming. The pod rate is coming down. So Beanstalk will start to deleverage more aggressively, and then in a week or two, if we can get a convert BIP going where you can convert deposited beans into deposited LP, that should increase stability as well. And we're thinking about that there should probably be a sister function where when the price is less than 1 and the TWAP is less than 1 over the previous season, that you should be able to go from LP back to deposited beans. And to some extent, that does create some sort of like unique way for LP providers and specifically just depositors in general to provide some sort of leverage or increase or decrease the leverage of their liquidity of the system, which is pretty neat. So right now it would be that the system is a little highly leveraged on that spectrum, but hopefully if that rule gets implemented, the high rate of silo beans to LP beans will come down significantly.
I think that sounds like a great idea. Personally, I have a lot more in the silo than I have in the LP, but part of that is because I just had a sow, I just had a harvest, and it just seemed easier to put them in the silo instead of to add this ETH or sell for ETH. And so I think that might be where other people are at too, and that would help it bring it back to peg, and it seems like a really elegant solution. So that's very exciting. I think so. Okay, do we have some other questions? Bernoulli Bean, I don't mean to bring you on the spot, but I think that you had a few questions that couldn't be brought up last week. Okay, well, in the meantime, maybe we could chat, Publius, a little bit about where you'd like to see the community development going. As far as looking at other successful projects that are really community driven, as opposed to, frankly, as opposed to product driven. Looking at, not to throw any shade at things like Roam DAO or anything like that, but are there directions that you find exciting that you'd like to encourage people to go in? Or just wanted to see, I know that we've had some discussions of second round of NFTs and things like that, but it'd be nice, since we have so many new members, maybe to talk a little bit in that direction.
Definitely. So we want community to have a ton of fun with Beanstalk, and there's some natural marriage between protocol and the fun that can be had. For example, the first Genesis edition of the Bean FTs, the only way you could earn one was by sowing beans, and that was greatly beneficial to Beanstalk and attracted a lot of sowers. And it seems like there's basically all of the Bean FT participants have now had their pods harvested, which is pretty cool. And so the minted first debt cycle, the shirts, that stuff's pretty cool in our opinion and fun for the community. And the volume has started to pick up on OpenSea over the past couple days, as Beanstalk has started to pick up as well. And so has the minimum price for the Bean FTs, which is pretty cool. So in general, when we see the volume and the floor price, all that stuff picking up on the NFTs, that's pretty cool. We had been hopeful that there was going to be a winter Bean FT edition, but both of the Bean FT proposals that were made thus far have failed. One received a quorum but didn't receive a majority, and the other received a majority but didn't receive a quorum. So the holidays are still a couple weeks away, and we're still hopeful that something might be done. And we have calls with JWW and Have You Been scheduled for later today to hopefully figure out what to do there. But that along with many other things which are not directly protocol related to a large extent, we're hoping to have the community really take the driver's seat and dictate where things should go and how things should look and operate. And we're going to try to focus more on the protocol side. But in general, consider this like a call to action to anyone that wants to get involved on the community side in whatever capacity you feel like is cool. Let's do it. There will be funds in the Q1 budget, hopefully, and we're excited to get things going in a more substantive fashion.
Sounds great. Yeah, I think there's a lot of exciting directions we could take this. One quick other question for you is, I think a lot of us were really pleasantly surprised at the fall theme, the kind of Thanksgiving style theme to the website when that dropped. Not to spoil any surprises, but is there anything on there? I saw some chatter in the Discord, in anticipation of a winter theme. Can you give us any hints as to that?
So we're not going to ruin any surprise, but we too have noticed the fondness of the community of the seasonal website themes, and we will hope to continue to deliver on that front. Is what we'll say.
So you're not going to do something. Okay,
No.
we have a new question here.
This is maybe the single area where we will not be full disclosure about the protocol, just because it's fun, and it's nice to have a little bit of a surprise. But yes, there will be some sort of winter edition of the website.
Wonderful. Okay, we have a question from TB3456. Bringing him up. Okay, TB, you're invited to the stage.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Take it away.
Well, thank you for doing this. I'm driving, so this might sound a little bit weird, but I am a new member of the community. I am so impressed and so thankful for all the work everybody's put together so far. My question is about seeds and LP tokens becoming tradable in, I don't know, exchanges or wherever. How do you think, have you thought about how the tokenomics for that kind of thing would work, and what kind of potential that would have? Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. So, Stalk, seeds, and silo beans, which are sort of the three parts of a deposit. If you think about it, when you deposit a bean in the silo, you get effectively a slip, a credit saying you deposited these amount of beans in this season. This is how much stock and this is how much seeds you have on the deposit. And over time, we hope to have both deposit itself and all of the assets in the deposit, the stock, the seeds, and the silo beans, tradable and fungible. So there's a few minor unsolved technical details on the implementation. For example, currently liquidity, you add an LP token to the silo, your stock and seeds are awarded based on the bean denominated amount of your LP tokens at the time you deposit. But the problem is, therefore, even within a season, those LP token deposits are not fungible in that case. So that's just one example of like a minor fungibility issue we're still working through. But in general, as the Beanstalk Farms development team starts to grow, we hope to start to add fungibility and liquidity to all of those different parts of Beanstalk, which again are going to be the deposit slip for beans, the LP deposit slip, stock, seeds, silo beans, and potentially even deposited LP tokens.
Awesome. Thank you. Just as a quick follow up, usually tokenomics works in so many different ways. I think the way, at least it feels like it's structured, is that we're always minting new beans, for example, or minting new seeds. So it's not like there's not, let's say, a limit to how much they will ever be, kind of thing. How do you see sort of like that aspect of it working, or that's really not the purpose of it? And you can always, that could be the thing, is that's the purpose of making seats, for example, fungible, is not that there is a limited amount and they go up and down in price, kind of thing. I mean, how do you see that kind of mechanism working in terms of, you know, yeah, just generally the specifics of the tokenomics. I'm just curious to hear any thoughts. I know this is not probably
Sure.
something that we spend a ton of time on.
So the supply of stock and seeds is generally somewhat proportional to the supply of beans. And when we think about how the structure of stock and seeds and silo beans becoming liquid, the mechanism is effectively as we have it envisioned, that there are going to be Uniswap pools of bean stock and bean seed and bean silo bean. And you'll also be able to deposit the LP tokens for each of those Uniswap pools in the silo. And our hope is that that will create a market structure where it continues to maintain that the only way to get stock or exposure to the upside of beans and beanstalk is to buy beans first. And that will preserve the decentralization of the stock system.
Got it. That's super exciting. And thank you so much for taking my question.
Okay, I'm going to grab some questions from the AMA thread here. Mute for 1 second here. All righty. We have here from Bean Counter. Are solutions being considered to mitigate the gas wars that will result from very competitive soil? Or is competitive soil not seen as a huge issue for the protocol?
So competitive soil is a great thing for beanstalk. It is an expensive thing for people that want to try to get a piece of the soil, and we understand that that's sort of expensive. And someone in the Discord did send like beanstalk is in the top 25 or was at some point in the top 25 of protocols that were burning ETH in failed transactions, which is pretty brutal. But in general, that is a function of the structure of the Ethereum network, and there's not much we can do on that front. But the fact that there's so much demand for soil is exciting and is an indication that the protocol is heading in the right direction. But unfortunately, that does result in the spirit of the free market of beanstalk, the excess demand for soil. It does make sense that people have to be willing to pay a premium to try to get it.
Okay, that makes sense. There was another question there. Assuming that Ether goes into a bear market, how would that affect the value of Bean? And if you could just talk about an Ether bear market a little bit.
Definitely. This is an important thing to understand about beanstalk, which is the main thing that will determine how beanstalk is affected is A, the magnitude of the drawdown in the Ethereum price, B, the speed at which the drawdowns occur, and C, and this is what's ultimately most important, where beanstalk is in its growth cycle. So if beanstalk if Ethereum had a 80% drawdown when the bean price was at 24 cents or 40 cents or 80 cents or even $1 when it was just recovering and there still wasn't a lot of demand for beans even at $1, that could have been really brutal for beanstalk. But at the same time, like right now, if Ethereum crashed 20% over the next 24 hours, we would feel very confident that beanstalk would still be at least $1. And over the past week, Ethereum did crash multiple times, more than 7 or 10% in a very short period of time. And in basically every instance, beanstalk maintained its peg. So over time, we hope, especially as beanstalk deleverages, that will become less of a risk factor. But in general, that remains a risk factor if there's a perfect storm where Beanstalk is at a high debt level, at a bad portion of its debt cycle, and then ETH comes down with the whammy, which to some extent is what happened during the pump and dump, where you did have a major drawdown in the ETH price, which did make the volatility on the downside even worse during the dump. So Beanstalk has experienced that to some extent in the past, but going forward, especially given the large amount of demand for beans above $1, we are optimistic that there will be a lot of demand for beans below $1 in an instance where ETH has significant drawdowns. And maybe the only other thing to add is the idea to convert back and forth within the silo from LP to Bean would also add a lot of resilience to a drawdown in the ETH price.
Okay, I think that really helps. I have a question here from Burnt Forest. This is a follow-up question to making stock or seeds tradable. What would the benefit be to having those traded? Seems like this would create an extra complexity to the system without necessarily benefiting the goal, which is a stable coin.
So ultimately, a more efficient market, the more efficient the market is around Beanstalk and beans, the more stable the bean price. And so by having a diverse infrastructure and ecosystem of not just beans, but stock, seeds, and silo beans that are all liquid and all are priced independently by the market and are all structured in a way where the main venue where the price is reflected is going to be a way that directly affects demand for beans, we should create, especially when you imagine what other protocols will be built out on top of not just beans, but stock and seeds, like the ability to borrow stock or borrow seeds. There's a massive amount of stability that will come from complex financial instruments being developed on top of a complex ecosystem that is Beanstalk when all of the assets are more fungible and liquid. And that's one of the things that really differentiates Beanstalk from other stablecoin protocols, which is it benefits from making everything liquid. And that's reflective of the fact that the core economics are generally all designed to bring the returns that are currently like negative carry costs in the existing stablecoins and turn that into positive carry costs.
Okay. I think that was a good way towards answering that. Do we have any hands up here? Let me get back to the questions. We have a question here from Divs saying, what do you think about the idea of adding an option to choose to automatically LP when sowing? I'm assuming they mean upon harvest.
So, no pun intended there. The short answer is that is difficult because that would require our account to be updated and transactions to be affected on the Uniswap pool, and that might have to happen across a ton of different accounts if there's a large a large harvest. And that could increase the cost of the sunrise function dramatically. But when we talk about infrastructure being built out on and around Beanstalk, there's an opportunity for a smart contract that could be open source that could potentially allow people to easily farm their stock or claim and LP harvestable pods when appropriate. So that does to some extent depend on your own security apparatus and infrastructure, but a lot of that can be facilitated to some extent. But it doesn't necessarily need to be part of the Beanstalk contract itself, if that makes sense.
Okay, we're looking for more questions now. You have a hand. Humble Farmer coming up again? Or not, sorry. TB. All right, TB. You're muted. Let's see if I can unmute you here. You'll have to
Hi,
unmute
thank you.
yourself. Okay, we can hear you
Yeah.
now.
Okay, awesome. I'm still driving. There was a question in the community, and I'm just kind of bringing it up again. I think it was about the price oracle and how it's dependent at the moment um, on USDC. In some ways, we are obviously trying to be a decentralized stablecoin. And I think it's interesting the way we did it, and I actually really like it. But I think it's helpful to ask, tomorrow that's a risk as well. What if something happens to USDC? Um, have we thought of alternatives and what we would do from that? I mean, I think that's just a helpful topic for especially new folks like me to understand, because it's not obvious when you first come in that that's how it kind of works. Um, but yeah, thank you so much for taking my question again.
Fabulous question. One of the most important aspects of the Beanstalk price oracle is that it is constructed in a way such that operators of USDC or any other centralized first generation collateralized stablecoin operator, such that they don't have the ability to censor Beanstalk in any way. So a more simple implementation of the main incentivized pool would be Bean USDC. But in that instance, that would give the providers of USDC the opportunity to ban or blacklist the pool address and effectively kill Beanstalk or kill that pool at the very least. And Beanstalk accordingly builds the main oracle or the main exchange where beans are traded and the price oracle gets its price is against Ethereum, which is the most decentralized asset on Ethereum in general from a couple different aspects. So the only exposure that remains to USDC is if USDC failed to hold the price, its price at $1. And to some extent, that is true that is a risk vector that exists. And if USDC failed to maintain its price at $1 for an extended period of time, that would distort the Bean price oracle. But in such an instance, Beanstalk could easily pivot to another USD stablecoin that also benefits from arbitrage opportunities created by its collateralized nature. And the reason we decided on USDC is because it appears to be of the collateralized stablecoin options the most likely to actually have collateral backing it and offer arbitrage opportunities to regularly return the price to one. And that is not to say that if USDC faltered in some capacity, we couldn't migrate the main pool to a Bean tether pool, for example, or even a Bean die pool if necessary. But a Bean die pool would be suboptimal in the sense that, again, we wouldn't want to have a Bean tether pool directly either. But the question is now whether we're creating a price oracle based on the Bean ETH and then proportionally against the die ETH or the tether ETH pool. So then indirectly you can get the price of a Bean or the price of a US dollar, the price of tether or the price of DAI potentially. So there's a lot of options here, but for the time, and you can also potentially go to multiple pairs. So you could do an average of the ETH USDC and the ETH tether pools to get a potentially more accurate price for $1. So there's a lot of different ways to go here, but for the time being, we do feel this is a very robust and sufficiently robust oracle.
Okay, that's a great answer. I have a quick follow-up sent by Stolen Hamburger. He says, what if the SEC clamps down on all centralized stablecoins? In that event, what do we use as an oracle?
So there's a couple things to be said here. One is, even if they clamp down, it seems to us impossible that there's not going to be any dollars issued on the Ethereum network. And all that is really the only thing that's required is for any of those stable coins to be trading on Uniswap. And so, sort of by definition, if any of those stable coins exist in any capacity, we would expect them to trade on Uniswap against Ethereum, and therefore that wouldn't necessarily be a risk factor. And in the instance where it is, uh, this isn't a problem that we've spent that much time thinking about because we think it's not realistic as a risk or a large or a high probability risk in the short term, meaning the next couple of years. But there's a lot of different ways we could innovate the price oracle further that would help Beanstalk get an accurate price for $1. But this is already a great case scenario where if all the other stablecoins have been regulated out of existence, that hopefully means that Beanstalk is the dominant stablecoin of DeFi at that point in time.
Yeah, I could see that being a huge opportunity for us. And there's always a clever way to have an oracle, like you said. JWW, we have you up on stage.
Yeah, apologies. I was, again, I think Dumpling, I was trying to raise my hand, but it seems like the only option is to jump
Come on up.
stage.
We're eager to hear about NFTs. Talk to us.
Yeah. I think that'll be a follow-up after this. I think we'll be shooting some stuff out in Discord, I think. But just in terms of the pricing oracle and switching it over, Publius, I think maybe even just to bring more reassurance to the team or even clarify, should that have to happen where we decide that we have to convert over to working with a different stablecoin, how quickly can we make that kind of a switch with the price oracle? I'm just kind of bringing this up in reference to the recent BDP, because I do think that's a reflection of how strong the community is and in terms of backing it and making these kinds of conversions, and maybe it will help the community feel a little bit more assured, knowing that there isn't going to be like some kind of attack or some kind of failure in terms of USDC wouldn't be debilitating, given what we've seen.
The short answer is it would be trivial to change from the USDC ETH pool to the Tether ETH pool, and if it were negatively significantly distorting the Bean price or the state of the Bean system, the system could be paused until a BIP is passed. But candidly, we don't expect the distortion on that price to be significant enough. And if it is, where you have a real drastic change in the price of USDC, where it's crashed and it's lost its peg, I think Beanstalk and the community could respond within a couple of hours in theory.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question from Bean Counter. I'm going to read here.
And just to close that out, Beanstalk can be paused immediately with a supermajority vote. And so if shit was really hitting the fan, if 2/3 of the stock voted to pause Beanstalk, when Beanstalk is paused, the TWAP is won until Beanstalk is unpaused. So you could potentially, in theory, immediately sort of pause Beanstalk and make sure that it wasn't exposed to whatever's happening to USDC, and then get a fix up in the next couple hours, and then it would take 24 hours for the BIP to pass.
Okay, thanks for that add-on. Okay, so we have Bean Counter here. This has been raised a couple of times in the Discord on the Econ channel. This is in relation to kind of the gas wars because of the scarce soil. He's saying, in periods of scarce soil, could you bid to burn X stock per bean sowed? Get to sow beans based on the amount of stock they're willing to burn, kind of Dutch auction style. This way gas costs are minimized and bots aren't rewarded. So really this is just talking about if you could offer to burn your stock or your seeds in a bid for soil. This is kind of a economic proposal from Bean Counter. Could you talk a little bit about that off the top of your head?
So ideas like that, it's not to say that they wouldn't work or improve efficiency of Beanstalk in general. They're a little bit complex both to implement and economically on their effect. And in general, we've tried to create Beanstalk in a way that is incredibly simple, almost stupidly simple. So it has very few things it has to consider and make an educated decision on. And accordingly, those types of especially complicated rules, which don't actually benefit the ability for Beanstalk to really maintain its peg, it might just help existing silo members participate in the lending, which again certainly wouldn't improve the efficiency of the lending market, and if anything, it would make the lending market less efficient because new lenders are at a disadvantage. So things like that need to be very closely considered before any changes to the overall mechanism are implemented, and instead we feel like minor tweaks like slight changes to the soil or the ability to convert within the silo that are very pointed and particular, and not general changes to the mechanism are what's appropriate at this time. And it seems like we lost Dumpling for a sec, so oh, here he is. Wonderful. We thought we lost you, Dumpling, so welcome back.
You did for a second, but I'm back. That's a very good answer. I hadn't even thought about that sort of insiders club aspect that you could have if you could keep bidding because of your existing stock and seeds, and new people would never be able, it'd be harder for them. They'd have to first go through the process. I think you have to be careful about these, but it is fun to explore those things. So thanks, Bean Counter, for that. Publius, I had a question. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, additionally, like that type of change would require sort of like an auction period for each window of soil, and that again would change the entire structure of the first in, first out mechanism. Like these types of changes that people, in general, we're very interested in what people want to change in the protocol, but we just want to caution against making changes that are all of the implications of which are not fully hashed out and considered. And that is where we get into the realm of on the technical or the economic or both, we can get into trouble.
Understood. Thanks for that. A quick question I had that I've been thinking of since we've had a couple of missed quorums, both in the BIPs and on the snapshot votes, and we never had before. So I'm wondering if maybe all of the new folks who have come to Beanstalk, aren't voting as much. Have we thought about any potential remedy to that if that keeps happening? There's some things that seem quite like they have very good support, like the Bean Marketplace. Looks like it might not pass, and so that's a concern. Pod Marketplace, yes, of course. So that's a potential concern, and I wonder if Publius had thought about that at all.
Definitely. So just to clarify, none of the BIPs have failed to reach a quorum in the sense that because you can only vote for, BIPs either reach a majority or they don't, but there's not necessarily a quorum because you can't vote against. Snapshot proposals are different in the sense that you can vote no, so you can have a quorum, which according to this was defined explicitly in the BIP-1, which created the budget, that a quorum for that round of proposals for all of BIP-1 would be 33% stock. It seems like as stock continues to get diluted, people are potentially less able to pay attention regularly to especially small allocations. So, for example, for Q1, we're thinking about introducing some sort of tiered quorum, depending on the allocation of the proposal. There may be a very low quorum, or if it's on the order of a few thousand beans, there may not need to be a snapshot proposal at all, because in order to have beanstalk farms really start to operate much more quickly, it doesn't necessarily make sense for there to be a couple-day proposal for every small check that needs to be made.
Got it. Okay, I'm looking for more questions here.
And if anything, that's sort of in line with the vision of funding independent development teams. The silo funds them, and then the development team is sort of independent thereafter from the silo.
Okay, I'm looking on the AMA board. Looks like we don't have too much more. Does anyone have any more questions? Raise your hand.
We're closing in on the 2-hour mark, so we understand if people are running out of gas here, but we'll leave a few more minutes for people to come up with questions. But just to kind of start to wind this down, make sort of a final call to action. We're thrilled by the amount of people that were throughout this AMA and popping in and out, and then here for almost the entire AMA, and that is great indication to us that this community and this protocol is heading in the right direction. And so it's very exciting to see many of your Bean PFPs, and we're just thrilled by the community that is forming. And if you feel like you want to take a more active role in the development of Beanstalk in whatever, literally whatever role you feel like you can add the most value, I can almost promise you there is a role and an opportunity available for you here. And we are trying to grow the team quickly and aggressively with really high quality, intelligent, curious people that really care about the success of Beanstalk. And, this is making sure that we're able to build a high quality, decentralized Beanstalk Farms development team, and then hopefully further expand to having multiple independent development teams. That's going to be essential to getting Beanstalk to a place where it is sufficiently decentralized and no longer dependent on Publius to sustain.
Certainly. And I think we're starting to have that really good energy with a lot of folks who are joining, and who have been here for a long time, but maybe who are just starting to kind of step into roles. So I think that's really exciting. Okay, Rubisco, have you back?
Hey, thanks. I feel like I'm that kid in class that's like sitting in the front row raising his hand over and over. But I am excited about
that kid always gets an A.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, maybe just
Dumpling, you'll get Rubisco some of the merch, hopefully.
I'll take it.
Absolutely. With that cute dog. Okay, what's your question?
So, yeah, guys, just kind of like going off the thread that you're winding up with the community energy and the excitement around it. I'm wondering if Publius can say anything definitive about the adoption rates lately, because it's kind of hard without doing a deep dive to get anything super specific about the number of people. There's unique sows that you have on the graph on the website, and then like Dex Tools has number of holders, but it's a little hard to triangulate a more specific number. So anything that you could say about that also helps us kind of spread the word and generate excitement to people we know, when we can say, hey, things are really starting to take off.
Well, it is hard to some extent to give you a great estimate. But one thing we would definitely say is if you look at the data for unique sowers, which is the last chart in the field section, you can see that actually over the past couple of days to a week, there's been a major uptick in new sowers. So when you see the curve start to go from like gradually increasing to what looks like exponential growth in the number of unique wallets lending beans to Beanstalk, that's very encouraging to us.
Does a number? Sorry, I'll just ask a question. Does the number of holders listed on Dex tools, for instance, is that a useful number? Because it's like that may or may not mean holders and sowers, or they are mutually exclusive, or people that are holding but not sowing. So it's like, what do we do with that number?
So it is, a little bit frustrating that, that problem is only people who are holding beans. And given that there is not much utility for the bean token right now, that the number of holders of the bean token are much lower, of course, than the number of, farmers who have invested in Beanstalk. So, and we do not have, as I'm sure you're aware, we don't have any graphics about the silo side of things so far. Now, this data is available, open to the public in our subgraph. And if anyone is interested in, doing any sort of dashboard or any sort of, analytics on the subgraph, we're happy to help anyone learn how to query the subgraph and get this data. And on our end, we will try to find, at least some way to give you guys an indication of the number of holders in the silo over time. But, as an example, just for what's possible with the subgraph, you can query all the stock by account, and it'd be very easy to kind of throw that into a pie chart. You can query all the deposited LP by account. You can query pause by account. And all these things are available in the subgraph. And it's a little bit frustrating because, the community is generally just the general crypto community is more familiar with using Dune Analytics to create these dashboards, but because Beanstalk implements EIP 2535, Dune Analytics has said that they don't support that standard yet. So that's why we've kind of tried to take the approach of trying to create a subgraph that has all this information to allow community members and farmers the opportunity to try to build these dashboards using those. So, just if anyone is interested in that, please feel free to let us know. We have a subgraph channel and you can start dropping questions in there.
Thanks a lot, guys.
I think that would be very exciting if we could get, of course, I'm familiar with doing analytics from other projects, and if we could get something kind of similar and get a community member to build it out, that would be amazing. And I'm sure we could get funding for that too. So I'd be happy to help someone write up a proposal if they want it. If anyone here is so inclined. Okay, well, as I think we are closing in on the 2-hour mark, thanks so much for everyone for coming and for staying around. I'm sorry if I missed any questions, but we'll do another one of these, and also I'm sure Publius can answer a few of these if there are any lingering ones in the AMA questions. Yeah, any last words, Publius?
We would just kind of reiterate that given the explosion in activity in the Discord, we're not able to read everything, and so if there's something that we need to see urgently, hit us with a tag, and that'll help us, or shoot us a DM or something like that. But we're really excited at the growth of the community, and our commitment is to you guys to making Beanstalk just everything that we hope it will be, and really change the game in DeFi across the board. Thank you all for coming, and thank you all for being just amazing, amazing young community. Have a nice rest of your day.
And last thing I'd mention, we do have one other event. Anyone who wants to come on Thursday for the DAO meeting. There is a DAO meeting. Is it, Publius, is it 8:30?
Yeah, 8:30 Eastern, but it should, based on the Discord events, it should adjust to your local time. And other just housekeeping items, there are some outstanding proposals. The Pod Marketplace proposal, which again is free to vote on, is about to expire. And the Beasley hiring proposal is also live. We would encourage everyone to vote on those. And there are a couple BIPs live. Also, the soil BIP will hopefully go live soon, and we would encourage everyone to take a look and consider voting for those. And we will talk to everyone soon.
Okay, thanks everyone.